liver, Unilever, posted between Tokyo, London, and Holland. The last posting was in Holland. And Kusumji has been very gracious to give us her premises for setting up our Singer project. That is last year. She's taking care of all the electricity, water, and all the necessary bills over there, and really looking after all our girls. We are ever so grateful to Kusum for helping us out with our project. Thank you so much, Kusum, and welcome to our meeting today.
We enjoy our meeting. Please feel welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
Rotary information. Project Surajmukhi. Pleased to share members under Project Surajmukhi. We have held several various camps at different locations. With these, we are able to educate and counsel the community about hepatitis C and how to keep themselves safe. We've had from the month of September till date 23 camps and have screened 2,054 people. Rajiv, are you going to show some photographs? These are the awareness camps at Project Surajmukhi, the hepatitis C camps that have been held at different places. And there were 23 we held from September to October. Okay, now next, the awareness camp, we move on. I'm pleased again to share with the members the awareness camp on menstrual hygiene, which was held on the 2nd of October, and this awareness was given to the adolescent girls at the Majlis in association with Radiological and Imaging Association under their program Raksha. And we thanks them, and sanitation kits were also distributed to the ladies and the girls. We also distributed 175 packets of dry ration, flour, rice, and sugar were also distributed. And this is major thanks to our new members, Rotarian Kavit Roya and Rotarian Shalini Roya, for their tremendous help in organizing this. The ration packets are all being delivered and the kits.
Rajiv, please mute everybody else.
Maybe go on, move on. Now, appeal for support members, the Ray of Hope, Asha Kiran. May I appeal to the fellow members to contribute to support Rotary India Literacy Mission, RILN, for their program Asha Kiran. This program is a child development initiative which can 50,000 out of school children who belong to vulnerable communities and also who are dropouts back the opportunity to be able to go to school. We will be sending the formal appeal letter and details for the program. And I once again appeal to members to please contribute generously and also appeal to your family and friends for the donations. Asha Kiran, the Ray of Hope. The next is toilet work at the first block at CR Park. I'm pleased to share with the members that under the CSR funds from Hughes, the work for upgrading of toilet block on the first floor of SDMC School, CR Park, is now completed and ready for the inauguration. That's good news. So when that is ever possible, it's open up, we perhaps will all try to be there for the inauguration. Over our secretary's announcements, please over to you, Pragyan. Thank you.
Thank you, Nabha ma'am. Good evening, everybody. Good evening to our guest from the district and past district governor Deepak Talwarji and assistant governor Mr. Gupta. We have our annual debate, and this year we are going international, and this is going to be our biggest debate ever, where we have clubs from England, Singapore, Dubai, and a lot of colleges, a lot of schools from India, all around India, one of the best schools. So we have 36 schools attending that. And we have that on the 30th and the 1st of November. On the 8th of November at 6 p.m., we have the club assembly that we normally have for all the club members to discuss the club affairs.
It's a Sunday, yeah? It's a Sunday.
It's a Sunday, that's right, 8th of November. And on 20th, we have the next speaker meeting. And we are looking for a very nice speaker meeting today. And thank you, Mr. Sharma, for accepting our invite and coming and attending this. I also take this opportunity to congratulate the anniversary girl, Jyoti Dhir, for being commended by Anup Mittalji for her amazing contribution towards training of the next year's team. Lovely work, Jyoti, and have a great year ahead, and have a lot of love between you and Sanjeev. Great work. Thank you so much. Over to you, Nava ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you. Today, we are proud to have Mr. Ramesh Sharma, the well-known award-winning feature film and documentary producer and director, and who has won numerous awards at the Indian and international film festivals. Actually, I would like to request Sita ji, our senior past president, Sita Vedlingam ji, to please introduce our speaker to the members. Thank you, Sita ji, over to you.
Well, I'm delighted to be able to introduce Ramesh Sharma, whom I've known for a very, very long time, because his wife and I were in college in the South at the same time. And I actually met Ramesh at his wedding reception in Delhi some years after we left college. Well, Ramesh is today, this is the 151st birth anniversary of the Mahatma. And that is why I wanted somebody to come this month who will speak on Gandhi. And I thought there could be no one better than Ramesh, because Ramesh's film released before COVID released itself upon us in the United Nations earlier this year. The film is called Ahimsa Gandhi, The Power of the Powerless. Now, this apt title, Power of the Powerless, is something that immediately starts people thinking. I mean, it started me thinking that how can the powerless have power? And this is what Ramesh is going to tell us through the eyes of the Mahatma, because he has interviewed world personalities who have all spoken about Gandhi. There is hardly anyone in this country who does not know Gandhi, although we have all been born in independent India and we have not had the privilege of seeing him in the flesh. But he's a figure that exists in the minds and heart and imagination of every Indian. Well, Albert Einstein said, generations to come will not believe that a man such as this in flesh and blood actually walked upon the earth. So it's not just India which has been enthralled by the Mahatma, because he's quite simply India's most famous citizen. But the whole world holds him in great awe and great respect. In fact, Ramesh is at the moment, he's in Andhra Pradesh, in Vijayanagaram. Had he been in Delhi, I would have asked him to show clips from this wonderful film. And one day when this COVID thing is behind us, I will ask him to show this film with his permission to this club. I thank Ramesh for coming here today. And I don't want to spend even a minute of the valuable time that we have on Zoom, considering this is Navratri Friday, which is a very, very auspicious day, because Hindus believe that on this day, the gods walk upon the earth. So I really don't want to stand between you people and Ramesh, and I want to give the floor over to Ramesh so that Ramesh can talk to us about this wonderful, wonderful film. Thank you for coming, Ramesh, and I'm all agog about listening to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you hear my voice?
Yes,
I'm on. Thank you, Sita, and thank you, meeting your Rotarians. I just noticed that you people are doing great work in the grassroots. And in many ways, that is what Gandhiji was all about. He was about the grassroots. But before I begin about that, let me tell you a little bit about why I did this film and what I wanted to really try to communicate with this film. over the years, I mean, most of you don't know my films because I make very serious films, but these are what you call films that are shown mostly in film festivals or in international forum or international distribution. Other than my first feature film, New Delhi Times, which had Sashi Kapoor and Sharmila Tagore and Om Puri, and which went on to win a lot of awards in India, including the Best Actor Award for Sashi Kapoor, which was the only time he's ever won the Best Actor National Award. Most of my films have been really on international subjects. I mean, I've made films on the Taliban, I've made films on, Choma, that one of those great linguists, Tibetan linguists, or Tucci from Italy who walked through the Himalayas. So I've always chosen subjects which was easy to distribute abroad because I couldn't get money in India. But I always wanted to make a film on Gandhi, primarily because there is so much violence in the world today that it has become almost acceptable that violence is the currency of our discourse. It's not just in India, it's in every country around the world. It's in America, it's in Britain. There is so little tolerance and there is so much of divisiveness. So I thought that let us look at somebody who was so inspirational that there is something about his message which has a lasting impact and which resonates with the world today, but which should resonate more than the world with the younger generation. So I thought of myself, there have been many, many films made on Gandhi, many documentaries made on him. Incredibly, what I call the most definitive biography made by Richard Attenborough, which won 11 Oscars, Academy Awards, which were shown all over the world. But yet that film was a biopic. And I was not interested so much in Gandhi's life as much as in Gandhi's message. Though as I began to make the film, I realized that Gandhi's message and his life were intertwined. Because Gandhi always believed that it was means that meant just as important as the end goal. So I thought that let me make a film where I would talk about Gandhi inspiring some of the seminal world movements in the world. And I began researching. And obviously, one of the great movements that he has, inspired and brought about in terms of sheer the use of the power of non-violence or ahimsa was the civil rights movement in America. And then you, of course, had Nelson Mandela and the anti-apartheid movement in South Africa. And then you had these great movements which very few people have heard of, but which really, when you speak to the people there, you realize how important Gandhi was in their lives. It is like, for instance, the solidarity movement in Poland, which was fought against the power of a nuclear-armed communist regime of Russia. And of course, the great, what I would call the greatest Velvet Revolution, or the greatest example of non-violence, which was in Hungary, Czechoslovakia at that time, with Václav Havel. In fact, Havel called his book The Power of the Powerless. So I thought, as I began researching it, I saw a common theme in each one of them. And I began to realize that this message has to go to the younger generation today. We must talk about it because the younger generation must realize that there is always an alternative to violence. And non-violence is one of them. And what greater way to communicate it than through the inspirational stories of these great men, most of whom went on to win Nobel Prize, even though Gandhi himself never won the Nobel Peace Prize. On his shoulders, there were many, 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 many people, Nobel Prize winners, who acknowledged that had it not been for Gandhi, they would not have been winning this prize. And I began the story, my film begins with his life in South Africa. Now, if you realize Gandhi studied law, he was a lawyer, like many of you are, like Sita, you are. He was a lawyer who studied in a temple in London. He was basically a sahib. He went there thinking that he would be an Englishman. He used to wear his dress almost like an Englishman. Though he became then became a vegetarian. Since he had promised his mother he would become a vegetarian. But when he came back to India, he was an unsuccessful lawyer. He writes in his own autobiography that he would be sitting in the Bombay High Court and he'd be sleeping because he just didn't know what to do. And it was like fate that kind of, in a way, serendipity, that he was called to fight a case in South Africa by local businessmen there who were Muslims, but who needed somebody who could have two essential qualifications. One, they knew the British law, and second, knew how to speak Gujarati, because these were all Gujarati traders. So when Gandhi went there, he went there as a lawyer, but slowly he began to involve himself in the rights of the Indians there, rights of the Asians there, rights of people, whether they were Chinese or whether they were of other communities. He began to realize that there was more to life than just fighting for this case. He won that case, not through the arguing with the judges. He won it very simply through reconciliation. He believed in mediation more than anything else. And that was one of the Gandhian traits. During that time, he also had very personal experiences of humiliation when the white man threw him out of a train compartment, even though he had a first-class ticket. He was not allowed to sit in it because the first-class ticket was only meant for white people, and browns and blacks were not allowed there. And in that cold night of a station, when he refused to get out of the train, he was thrown there, literally. He felt not just a sense of humiliation, but a sense of epiphany, that I could do two things. I could go back to my country, swallow my pride, and fight. So he decided that no, I will sit back and fight. And this was the beginning of what I call Satyagraha. You know, what began to became known as the greatest truth force. And what happened at that time was that the Indians were fighting for their own rights. The Africans, the white British Africans there, because South Africa at that time was under British rule, they had laws that Indians couldn't own properties in certain places. Indians needed certain cards to go from one place to another. Gandhi wrote to the officers, the authorities, and said, this is wrong. We need to have the same rights as what you have. When the authorities refused to agree, he said, we will protest. And so all the Indians got together in a kind of mass meeting. They were speaking in different languages because there was a huge diversity there too. But all of them were angry. They wanted to fight because there was one particular clause of the law that allowed a British officer to enter the home of the woman and the home of the Indian or the Asian and question the members of the family, including women. And there were fundamentalist, conservative family members there who decided this will not do. We will not allow our women to be touched. And they said, we will, if necessary, we will take weapons. And Gandhi said, no, we will not fight them with weapons. We will fight them, but we will fight them through non-violence. And it was on the 9th of September, 1906, in the Johannesburg, when he first articulated this word Satyagraha, which became the mantra for him. Now, it's very ironic that the world today knows 9/11 as the day when the Twin Towers in America were brought down. But almost 90 years before that, in 9th of September 1906, Gandhi gave the world an alternative to that violence through non-violence. Now, Gandhi's non-violence and struggle went on in South Africa, but it was not, what would you say, that was the end of his story there. He became a great iconic figure for Indians who were fighting against the British for their independence. Because by then, Britain had completely, the East India Company had completely taken over India, literally, was in fact marauding India. So there were people like Mr. Gokhale and others who saw Gandhi's leadership, saw Gandhi's passion. They decided that let's get Gandhi over to India and maybe help him lead the struggle struggle for our independence. Gandhi had been influenced by 2, 3 very important books that he mentions in his own autobiography. One of those books was obviously the Bhagavad Gita, which to him was like his Bible, but also was the Sermon on the Mount, which he read when he was in England, and he was absolutely astounded by the depth of compassion that was shown in that writing of the Sermon on the Mount. The third was Tolstoy. Now here was a man who was an obscure lawyer in South Africa, and he began corresponding with Leo Tolstoy, who was at that time acknowledged as one of the leading novelists in the world. And Leo Tolstoy began to talk to him about the importance of civil disobedience, about the importance of nonviolence, and how it would actually be the only way that civilization could actually exist. And Gandhi was hugely influenced with that. The other influence that Gandhi got was from America. There was a man called David Thoreau. Thoreau was at that time one of those people who first began actually civil disobedience, who decided to go to prison rather to give in to unjust laws. Reading all this, Gandhi actually began to think that there was obviously some way of trying to achieve what you want to achieve from those who were in positions of power, speaking truth to power through this act of civil disobedience. When he came to India, for the first year, he just traveled around in trains. First thing that he did was he shed his clothes. He shed his babudam. He took away his coats and his jackets and his ties and his legal attire and everything, and he began to wear what the average Indian was wearing in the fields, because he knew that if I wanted to fight for Satyagraha, I had to make it from grassroots up. No civil rights revolution or civil disobedience can go from top down. It must be a people's movement. And so he went around the country meeting everybody. He went to the Kumbh Mela, he went and met all religious leaders, he went to Shanti Niketan and met Tagore, but he was silent throughout. He didn't want to say anything. He was absorbing, he was observing, he was taking down what India had to offer. And during that period, he of course had his first great, what you might call, confrontation with the British. And that was in Champaran, a village, near in Bihar, where he was called to see the plight of the indigo farmers, where they were forced to do indigo farming and they were losing a lot of money. And when Gandhi went there, he took with him huge number of lawyers because he was a lawyer himself. And what he found was, to his surprise and to his dismay, was absolutely that the Britishers were treating these farmers and these peasants with incredible impunity of cruelty. And Gandhi began to take down notes from each one of them. In fact, now a book is being published next year where the entire affidavits, you might call them, or witness recordings, renditions of each one of these farmers has been collected by some of the greatest lawyers. One of them was Dr. Rajendra Prasad, who went on to become the first president of independent India. Champaran gave him the first insight into what India was all about. And therefore, Gandhi launched in his life, he launched many things, but he is known for 3 of the major agitations that he launched for Indian independence. The first was the non-cooperation movement of 1920 to 22, which he stopped because in Chauri Chaura, there was a police station where the mobs, who were the people who were fighting so-called non-violently, became violent, and they burned down the police station, and about a number of policemen were killed there. And Gandhi said, no, you are not yet ready for a non-cooperation movement. I'm going to stop. Nehru was upset with him. Patel was upset with him. Rajendra Prasad was upset with him. They said, what are you doing? You're slowing down the momentum. And Gandhi said, no, if we have to achieve independence, it has to be through non-violence only. It was in 1930 then he resumed it again with what is now known as the iconic Salt March. He decided that the only way, he always knew that one of the reasons why the Britishers were ruling India, and this is true of every tyrannical, every oppressive regime, is when you have the cooperation of the people. If the people stop cooperating, no regime, however powerful, can survive. So what Gandhi wanted was a symbol that could get the entire Indian into participating in his vision. And he found that symbol in salt. Every person, every family takes salt, and the British levied tax on it. But Gandhi's salt march has been very simplified. Today we think that, oh, Gandhi took some people, he went walking from Ahmedabad to Dandi, and he picked up the salt, and it became a salt march. No, he's prepared himself for it. Gandhi's non-violence has got such incredible depth that one has to really understand him only through the detailing of how he does it. And what did Gandhi do? He took 79 people, 79 adherents to his Sabarmati ashram in Ahmedabad, and he trained with them for 6 months. He told them, this is what you will do if you are attacked by the Britishers. This is how you will react. There will be no attack. There will be no violence from your side. You will not reciprocate anything, however hard the provocation. If they hit you with their lathis, you take that. And he trained them throughout for all that. And he started marching only after they were fully trained. Because Gandhi completely believed that if his people reacted against the British force was going to be so powerful, it would be impossible to really, fight them. Of course, the story of Gandhi's Salt March also brings another aspect of Gandhi, which is his sense of communication. He knew that the only way he could really arouse the conscience of the world was for people watching it. So he sent invitations to practically all the news channels from all over the world. But there was one particular journalist, Webb Miller, who belonged to the UPI, which is like a Reuters or PTI of the world at that time. And Webb Miller followed the Salt March. And when the march ended, and of course Gandhi was subsequently after a few days he was arrested, but Gandhi made sure that Sarojini Naidu and others took over the march by itself, and they went to these Dharsana salt mines. There was brutal beating by the Britishers, but the Gandhian satyagrahis did not even raise their hands. Such brutality was there, and Webb Miller was there recording it. And his report, which came out in every newspaper in the world, because he was a UPI, as I said, as a wire agency, it stirred the conscience of the world. And as some people say, the moral authority of the British Empire was completely shaken. Now, this was the other great Gandhian sort of a thing. The third great Gandhian impact, I'm saying this all because of the time factor that we have. 1942 was what was known as then the Quit India movement. Gandhi was again arrested. He was taken out, but by which time Second World War had begun. And with the Second World War, there was a change of regime in England. Winston Churchill had lost the election. Clement Attlee had come in, and they had decided that India had to be free, had to be given independence. But of course, that was the time when Muhammad Ali Jinnah decided that no, we will not be part of India. Muslims needed a separate country. And Gandhi was hugely upset, because one of the things that Gandhi always believed, and he believed it so strongly, is on interfaith harmony. He believed that because of his own training, his own reading. In fact, if you go to Ahmedabad in the Gujarat Vidyapeeth, which was a university that Gandhi set up, there's a room there called the Bible Room. Every Saturday, Gandhi would go there and teach people chapters from every religion, because Gandhi believed one very strange, very powerful, his mantra, is that I believe that every religion has something good in it. And it's my job to make you, not to convert you to Hinduism, but to make you a better Muslim, make you a better Christian, make you a better Jain, make you a better Buddhist, and you can make me a better Hindu. Then only we can live together. So when this partition began and this riotings began and 1946, this incredible bloodbath began in Bengal and Noakhali, Gandhi was absolutely shattered. It was almost like like everything that he stood for was being repudiated. Everything that he wanted to achieve for India was being crushed. He did not want partition. He reluctantly had to agree to partition. But one of the things that he always said was, India will never be a theocracy. India can never be a Hindu Rashtra. And he went there and he pleaded with the Muslims to ask them to stay back. He said, if you stay back, only then will people realize that we are a multicultural, multi-religious faith, that this is the diversity of India that will save it. Otherwise, we are going to be balkanized. Unfortunately, of course, there was violence, and the biggest violence was in Noakhali, which is now in East Pakistan, where the Muslims came down on the Hindus, and Gandhi walked there all alone with a couple of colleagues through 47 villages, and he walked barefoot because he believed very strongly that the blood of the innocents had been soiled in that earth, and he says, this is my atonement. By 1947, India achieved independence, but Gandhi was not there in Delhi because he said, this is not the independence I wanted. This violence, this bitterness between Muslims and Hindus, this is not what India should be. So he stayed back in Calcutta, and Mountbatten very evocatively says to him that in Punjab side, we have 500,000 army men, because of the great violence that is taking place. In Calcutta, I have a one-man army, and that is Gandhi. That was the power of Gandhi because he went on fast there to stop the Hindu-Muslim riots. He succeeded in stopping the riots, by which time he was called to in Delhi, because in Delhi, it was a tinderbox in there.
इसमें सेटिंग में आती है अल्टर हो गया था इसका
मैं खींचूं अपनी तरफ
एक मिनट देखा दे रही
And when he came to Delhi, of course, as we all know, in 1948, on 30th of January, he was shot dead. But Gandhi's philosophy did not die with
सेटिंग
him.
में ही अल्टर हो गया था नाम का
By which time his philosophy had already been taken to the United States. In 1936, there had been black preachers who had come to India and requested him that, can we please ask you to come to India, to USA, and talk to the black, the Negroes there. And Gandhi said no. But I can tell you this much, that the power of nonviolence will be demonstrated by the African Americans, because you know what the struggle of nonviolence is. And actually that is what happened. It began with a man called Martin Luther King. Martin Luther King was a pastor in Atlanta in one of the churches there. He heard about Gandhi through one of the people who had met him. And after hearing about what Gandhi had done in India, he went out and bought 6 books on Gandhi. And he read them. And as Martin Luther King's son says in my film, he tells me that my father believed that Christ was his inspiration, but Gandhi taught him the method. And that is when the civil rights movement began in America, which was completely nonviolent, based entirely on the Gandhian principles of ahimsa, based entirely on the power of the powerless, because it began with one lady called Rosa Parks. The first incident that takes place, the black women were not allowed, or black men or women were not allowed to sit on a seat if a white man came in and there were no other seats there. Those seats were reserved for the white. But this lady saw an empty seat, sat there. When a white man came, she refused to get it. And so she was arrested, but she refused to take bail. She was sent into prison, and Martin Luther King became her spokesperson, and he organized what was the first boycott. For 381 days, no black person rode the buses of Montgomery till the were forced to give in and change the law, which is what Gandhi always said, that if you do not cooperate with the oppressor, their time will come where the oppressor has to give in, because it is this cooperation with the oppressor that allows them to carry on being in power. And of course, the great march to Washington took place in 1963. And by 1964, the first Civil Rights Act was signed by Lyndon B. Johnson. But even during that time, blacks were not allowed to vote. There was always what was called voter suppression. You know, blacks were given bottles in which they were asked to count the number of chewing gum that were there, or there were, marbles that were there. And if they couldn't count the right number, they were disqualified to vote. And so young people like John Lewis, who were then working with Martin Luther King, began a march on Selma. It was a march in which they were brutally beaten. But like Gandhi, they believed that they did not have to react to violence with violence. The conscience of America was raised. And by 1965, they had to sign the other Voting Rights Act, which kind of brought in the first. It's flawed. Americans are still fighting for it. And that is what's so great about Gandhi, that everything that he did in the 1920s, 30s, 40s, to this day remains valid, because Gandhi is the symbol of dissent. Gandhi is the symbol that unjust laws must be fought. Gandhi is the symbol that if you see something that is wrong, if you see something that is unjust, you have a moral duty to get up and fight for it. And there is a lesson for that in India today. We are going through a time where people have been arrested and being charged with sedition, being young students. I mean, there is almost like there is no freedom of expression, that you speak against the government, you are actually trying to topple the government. It is one of the most painful things for people like us, because unless and until we believe, we say we worship Gandhi, we call him, we have Gandhi Jayanti and all, we celebrate every year. Yet the basic principles of Gandhi are completely being negated. And the same principles of Gandhi was practiced in Poland by a shipyard worker who was practically an illiterate. He was a class 10 or 12 person who just knew how to weld. But he understood inside him that if we do not bring together people and do not bring in this sense of non-cooperation with a force as powerful as a communist Russia, there was no way that we could get our rights. And the first thing that he fought for was the right to start a union, the shipyard union in Gdansk. And of course, the name of the man who began it all was Lech Walesa. He went on to win the Nobel Prize and become the president of Poland later. But this was where the first time the cracks began to show, even in communism. The Berlin Wall fell in 1989. But as many people say, the real crack began in 1980 because the Russians could not crush the solidarity movement. By which time, all the other communist movements in the Warsaw Pact, in the Eastern Bloc, one by one started opening up. And of course, the greatest story of that was in Czechoslovakia, where the crushing communism was felt by the people there, because they had for the first time glimpsed a certain amount of what is glasnost, a sense of freedom in 1968, when the Russians marched their tanks in and crushed that with Dubček, who was then at that time a Politburo member of the Czechoslovak regime, but realized that Czechoslovakia needed to open up. And people like Václav Havel, who was a great poet and a playwright, was put in prison because of his dissident writing. But when he was taken out, he began to mobilize people through nonviolence, purely through nonviolence. And of course, the time came where one incident took place. A student, they asked for there's a student, what you might call a memorial day, because a student had been killed during the Nazi regime. And during this time, every year they asked for permission to set out a certain amount of, a parade or a demonstration. The government didn't allow it. And that was the first mistake. And when they allowed it, they cracked down on it. And of course, one student died. And that led to some kind of a wildfire almost. And 300,000 people gathered together in the square of Václav Square in Prague. And it was one of the greatest speeches given by Václav Havel. But what was more exciting was they used a symbol. Each one of those people, 300 people, they took out their car key and they began ringing it. You know, ringing one bell, one car key, of course, it's just a sound of a tinkle of a little keys there, clanging there. But 300,000 car keys being rung together was almost a symbol of protest. And it was only a matter of time before the communist regime crashed. And over 100 million, in fact, people in the East European bloc became democratic. That was the power of Gandhi's message. And as you know, we go today into the 21st century and we see nuclear armed countries and we see what is happening in China and we see what's happening at the Indo-Pakistan border or the Indian-Chinese border, we realize the words of Gandhi as spoken by Martin Luther King when he came to India in 1959 as a pilgrimage to see what his great hero and the man who inspired him was. And at that time in Calcutta, he gave an incredible speech on Gandhi. And he ended the speech by saying, let us remember only one thing. This is not a fight between violence and non-violence. The fight is between non-violence and non-existence. And that is what Gandhi taught us. Gandhi taught us about dissidence, but against injustice. Gandhi taught us about cooperation, but interfaith harmony. He taught us about using means that were honest and being completely wedded to the truth. And he taught us, most importantly, and he always said that, don't hate your enemy because tomorrow you have to talk to him. Hate what he's doing to you, but never hate your enemy. And remember, the choice is not between violence and non-violence. It is between non-violence and non-existence. That is all there is. And if there are any questions, I'd be very happy to answer.
Great hearing you. So much we've learned today. Thank you so much.
Really great. So much insight. My God, one only knew the super. We know nothing. After hearing Ramesh, you really feel, gosh, so much.
Enlightened.
Yes.
But tell me, why was it difficult to get funding for this movie in India? Why did you need to look for funding overseas?
We were to ask those people.
That's very surprising.
I went to everybody. Well, one of the reasons was because, to be fair, I wanted to make the film my way. I didn't want to say, don't put the Dalai Lama, because the Indian government won't like it. Don't put, certain countries, Poland, because we have a good relationship with the Polish government today, which is now turned right-wing. I was not going to, do any of those compromises. As I said, I was wedded to the truth, and I was making a film on Gandhi. I wanted to say it with as great honesty as possible. And I have some of the greatest names in my film. Congressman John Lewis, who died recently, one of the greatest Gandhians who was alive, and Barack Obama. In fact, he tells Barack Obama in my film, he says, I told Barack Obama that had it not been for Martin Luther King and Gandhi, you would not have been president of the United States. So I mean, it was that reason why I needed money from abroad. I went to everybody. I went to I didn't go to the government of India. I must be very clear about that. I can't blame the government for not giving me money. I didn't even go to them. But I went to all what I call the enlightened industrialists, the money bags. But they're all scared because today we are living in whether you like it or not, I'm very sorry to say this. The courts in India are a shame. I mean, Sita is there and I feel very sad saying this to her, but I feel extremely, extremely disappointed that we have lost our greatest institution. I cannot believe a single judgment that comes out of the court. Whether it is good, bad, or ugly, most of the time I'm cynical about it. I want to know the bench. I want to know the judge's name. Then only I want to know what the judgment is about. Because there is an agenda and everything. The press in India is compromised. There is nothing about it. But look at the way Gandhi did it. Gandhi believed that everybody had to communicate. And during that period, when there was no communication, what did he do? He had printed Indian Opinion and Young India and Harijan and all those papers. But he ensured that they were all published in vernacular languages. He published it in Gujarati, he published it in English, he published it in Hindi, but he got Rajagopalacharya to publish it in Tamil, he got others to publish it in Bengal. That was the greatness of Gandhi. He understood India. He understood that the people of India are in the grassroots. They are not those who are living in clubs and living in parliaments, and that's why he never took any political position. He loved Nehru, he loved Patel, he loved Rajendra Prasad, he loved Abdul Kalam Azad, he loved Khan Abdul Ghaffar Khan and all that. But he never himself wanted to be in politics. So for a little while, he was the president of the Congress Party, but that was in the early days.
Anybody else? Question answer? Hello?
Spellbound.
Spellbound, yes. We just don't know where to begin with what question to ask. There's so much. It's really wonderful. Very, very intense meeting.
This is Pragyan Sharma. Sir, I have a small question. And before the question, sir, thank you so much. It was an amazing speech. We have really learned a lot from you today. A great command on the Indian history, in fact, world history as such. Now, I always had this question. There is no doubt that Gandhi was the best we had. He was a great person. We have all read about Gandhi's greatness. There is no doubt about that, and I'm not disputing that one bit. But please, what I want to know from you is that, was it possible for Gandhi to expedite the transfer of power from the British to the Indian government? Did his ego or the policies that he actually stood for not delay that transition? Question number, that is my question.
Let's be fair. I'm not a historian. Okay, I have my knowledge that comes from other historians. I wasn't there at that time, but my research, whatever I've read, very clearly shows that Churchill was not interested in giving India independence. And as long as Churchill was there was nothing anybody could do. He was, as somebody says in my film, Ramchandra Gua, he says, Churchill was an absolutely unreconstructed imperialist. He believed that British people needed their freedom, but he would not give that same freedom to Africans, to other colonies, including India. After the Second World War, when Churchill lost the elections and Clement Attlee came in, the Labour Party was always a little more, one might say, compromising in terms of giving India independence. But by then, there was always such a division that had been created through this divide and rule sort of a policy that had been done, that it was impossible for India to have remained as one country. And that was Gandhi's it is his greatest regret. He died as a broken man. If you listen to some of the speeches that he gives, there are radio recordings that are available, archivals in All India Radio. He's giving there in Birla House, and he's saying, "Mera to koi sunta nahi hai. Main kya karoon?" Because people like Nehru and Patel and all the others, they had fought for independence so much that they wanted anything. Yeah, theek hai yaar, inko Pakistan chahiye, chalo de do. At least we will have whatever we have and let us carry on with life. And that is, the thing with Gandhi. You're right. Gandhi could have probably, got it earlier if there was no Churchill. But when you have an adversary like Churchill, no country could have got it. I mean, look at the brutality that they created in Africa. Look at what Belgians did in Congo. I mean, all that is now coming out. The colonial history has never been taught either to India or to the countries where they dominated. And it's only, you know, and then Gandhi became in the great symbol because of that. Because once India became independent, almost all colonialism disappeared. He was the symbol of social equity around the world.
Thank you so much, sir. The second thing, sir, I wanted to take a slight objection, but I'll not do that today because you are our guest. We will sit down and talk over it, sir, and I'll convince you that it is only our Indian judiciary that stands up and protects individual liberty even today. There is no other institution that does that.
Pragyan is a good lawyer. He's a
will
lawyer,
have to
that's why
say-
he's getting all that out.
I will have to say there are exceptions.
Yes,
With all due respect, I'm not saying there isn't. There are. I am witness to it.
Yes.
I myself, my films have been banned, and I had to go to the Indian judiciary.
No, see, Pragyan, what happened with Prashant Bhushan might well happen with Ramesh.
No. I agree. There are good judges. I'm not denying that. I'm please. I mean, please don't think that I'm painting everybody with the same brush. There have been great. I mean, I remember, you know, I grew up in a small town in Kalimpong, and I used to have, you know, he used to treat my mother like a daughter. There was Justice S.R. Das, you know, one of the great Chief Justices of India. He was at that time the chairman of the Statesman Company, a board of statesmen. And I remember talking to him about certain judgments, and, you know, it would be fascinating to listen to. Today, when I read the judgments, the language is even not there.
As on yesterday, Justice Dipankar Gupta of the Bombay High Court, you should have seen the observations he made on Republic TV and Times.
I saw that and I admire him, but I'm talking about the Supreme Court of India. I'm talking about things that are happening in India today in the Supreme Court.
We can't cherry pick, sir.
Supreme Court is supreme. Anyway, we'll talk about it when we meet.
Pragyan, can I say something?
Yes, please.
Sir, taking forward from where Pragyan left, being a lawyer myself, since the institution was said, something was said about the institution. You know, I yesterday watched a movie called Chicago 7, which is on Netflix. It is highly being admired on that movie.
Absolutely.
And I'll use a dialogue from that movie, which is relevant to our times. And
absolutely,
it says that the institutions of our democracy are wonderful, which are presently populated by some terrible people.
Yes.
So I mean our institution of judiciary is wonderful. It may be populated by some terrible people, but let's not. And now I have a question. That was my observation, and I have a question. Gandhi died almost 7 decades back. Martin Luther died almost 5 decades back. They actually sacrificed their lives for whatever philosophy and whatever they were trying to achieve. But even after so many years, the divide for which they both fought remains. In India, the Hindu-Muslim divide is there. It is still there. It is visible in every facet. And the same, whether it is the US election, it ends up being black and white. And in India, it ends up being Hindu and Muslim. So where did we go wrong?
Well, I suppose ultimately, you know, it is us. It is our own leadership. There has to be a moral leadership that has to be incredibly, if I am to use the Gandhian method, you know, philosophy to it, the moral leadership is so important. Gandhi's philosophy was based only on one simple thing: God is truth. God is compassion. I remember somebody going to Gandhi, and this was his talisman, and he was asked, how do I know that the policy that I am doing today in my department is the right policy? And Gandhi said, at one answer, he says, think of the poorest man in your country. And if your policy can wipe the tears from his eyes, then it is the right. We lost all that. We lost that sense of idealism. We became greedy. We have today become a consumer society that is so evil, so incredibly venal. Can you think of lynching in the 21st century? Can you think of the kind of old rage that we find where people take out guns? Can you think of the rapes that go on little girls, and the not just rape, the brutality of that rape? It almost makes you feel that there is something inhuman within you. There has to be a transformation. There has to be a spiritual experience, not religious experience, a spiritual experience that takes us and lifts us, makes us transcendental, which is why we need inspirational stories, which is why the story of Gandhi and Martin Luther King and Nelson Mandela and all these people should be taught in everybody's school, must be kind of made into a mandatory reading. I mean, like for instance, in journalism, recently one of my very dear friend, he was much, much older than me. He died at the age of 92. But one of the greatest journalists in the world today, Harold Evans, he was the editor of Times of London and the Sunday Times. He did some of the greatest investigative journalists ever done in the world. He has written his own autobiography called My Paper Chase. If you ever get a chance, read it. I have always maintained that that book should be a mandatory reading for every person in the newsroom of every newspaper or television channel in the world. Because there is something called a certain sense of service. You know, institutions like yours, like being a lawyer or being a journalist, is not only about making money. It is basically serving the country, ensuring that truth prevails, Satyam Jayate. And that is what journalism should also be. So what you're saying is basically the collapse of the moral order within us. Our moral compass is not there. When your moral compass is not there, division comes in. You begin to then have, like Donald Trump has, grievances. And these grievances are then passed on to others. So I am not getting a job, it's because of the Muslim. I am not getting a thing. And then, of course, there's rumors that are spread, whether it's social media, whether it's whispering campaign, whether it is your own fundamentalism. You know, it is wrong. We all have, that's what Gandhi always said. Look for the goodness in everybody. He always believed that there is a redemptive factor in every human being. Everybody can be redeemed. There's a goodness in everybody, and you have to look for that goodness. Instead, we accentuate the evil in everybody. I mean, it is not an easy thing, answer to what you're saying. We are going through tough times, we're going through challenging times. And when a thing like COVID comes in, what does the government do? I'm sorry to, I'm not blaming one particular government or the Congress or the BJP or the left front or anybody. Everybody is responsible because corruption has become in our DNA. There is nobody who's not corrupt. And when that happens, you begin to see these cracks coming. So you then begin to look at, you begin to look at what I call headline management. You want to take away from people asking difficult questions of you, of your leaders. So what do you do then? You create a bogey of a war. You create a bogey of a religion. You create a bogey of casteism. India, caste is just, when Gandhi began his salt march, you know what he did? He used to go to the villages, and the first thing he would do would be go to the wells, take the water from the untouchables. And the upper caste would be appalled. Remember, this is 1930s. Upper castes are appalled at that time. But Gandhi said, no, it is not just the white man who's oppressing the brown man. It is the brown man who's oppressing the brown man.
I think the caste system has been the biggest curse to mankind in India.
There are many other things like that. So we have our fault lines. So I'm sorry we're taking a long time. Please, if there's anything to meet again, and I'll try and show my film, and you can then.
Yes, you must show the film, Ramesh.
It's been such a pleasure.
Showing of your film.
So does anybody else have any question also, or maybe go on?
There are lots to ask, but I think we'll look for another time when we can ask him a lot of questions.
There is so much actually. First, even to assimilate what we've heard is wonderful.
Yeah, that's true.
So much at all. really an eye-opener. Thank you.
Thank
Thank you. May I request...
And all the very best in all the work that you people are doing. I saw your thing. It's wonderful because my daughter is doing a similar work here, and she's adopted 40 villages and schools, giving water and sanitation to the poorest of the poor. And all her water stations are put in the Dalit aspect, in the Dalit side of the village. So, you know, it's wonderful.
I'd love to meet her, sir. I'd love to meet her.
Yes,
you will.
we would, because
It'll be an honor to meet her.
absolutely. May I request our past president, Anita Bhardwaji, please, to give the vote of thanks? Anita?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, of course we can.
Yeah, I'm sure the others can hear you. Yes.
Mr. Ramesh Sharma, it's a privilege to have such a well-known and award-winning feature film and documentary producer-director speak to our club members. Your talk today was enlightening and very, very interesting. The principle of non-violence is shared by so many religions in our country: Hinduism, Buddhism, and of course, Jainism. We see it as a hallmark of Gandhi's philosophy, which he used so effectively against the British Empire. You seem to have captured the essence of Gandhi's philosophy and the profound influence of his teachings all over the world, and why it remains relevant today more than ever. Our compliments on your passion and dedication and commitment to your work and art. We wish you every success for your film. And do convey my regards to your wife, Uma. We go back many, many years to Visakhapatnam days. On behalf of the Rotary Club of Delhi Garden City, I'd like to say thank you very much for being here with us this evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Ramesh. Thank you. But before you go, please don't go. We would like to present you with a gift. I will open it and show. Rajiv, where are you? You have to zoom.
Is it a virtual gift?
But at least you can see it.
Please do not go away, Sharmaji. I have to show you the gift. And this is again the courtesy of one of our members running a slum school, and some children have made this with their own hands.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you very much. I'm honored.
They work on this so they're able to educate themselves and look after their families. And that is what, as a club, also support and nurture. So it will give a great pleasure and best wishes to you and your family, and a very, very happy Diwali. I don't think you can see it even. I don't know where's Rajiv to zoom in on.
No, we can see that. We can see that.
Okay. So thank you so much for being with us, and it will reach your residence. We'll take the address from
Anything that would be seditious. Thank you.
What a great meeting. Lovely.
Bye-bye.
Word. Listening to you. Thank you.
Bye.
So the meeting is adjourned, and can we maybe stand up for the national anthem?
National anthem.
Yes, please.
जन गण मन अधिनायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता पंजाब सिंध गुजरात मराठा द्राविड उत्कल बंगा विंध्य हिमाचल यमुना गंगा उच्चल जलधि तरंगा तव शुभ नामे जागे तव शुभ आशीष मांगे गाहे तव जय गाथा जन गण मंगलदायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता जय हे जय हे जय हे जय 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 हे.
Thank you so much, members, for being with us. Hi, Scott. Good to see you.
रोटरी का क्या देखा नहीं? अच्छा.
So how did you like it?
Not big. Yeah.